you trust the CIA? Do you trust your Central Intelligence Agency?
Essentially, we trust them to carry out their responsibilities. We always remain a show-me type of attitude. Make sure that's why we're here. We are here to exercise oversight to make sure that, as best we can, that they are, in fact, living up to the letter and spirit of the law. It doesn't always take place, but most of the time. I'd say 90–95% of the time that they live within the rules.
We have been put in the position of being the spokesman for the free world.
Australia just happened to be there. Australia is a secure environment.
We are respectful of everybody's sovereign borders.
Australians are perceived by the Americans to be a little odd about some of these things. We have to protect them from themselves, like a big brother to a little brother. So they just put up a cover story and say it's a space project of some sort. And of course, we're not going to say anything.
There is a great deal less to this story than meets the eye.
It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
You were telling a lie.
Well, yes, that's what cover is.
I would not feel an obligation to report any illegal intelligence activity because there has been no indication of any illegal intelligence activity.
U.S. intelligence, namely the CIA and NSA, would be in control of Pine Gap today. And if we have a war, it's my sons who will fight and die, not theirs.
Come on, let's wake up the birds, eh? That one, ever so lightly, just lightly. Okay, you go. In the towns and the valleys.
No one seems to trust anyone anymore. There's so much fear and so much confusion. People saying one thing and doing another.
What sort of day is it going to be?
Sunny.
Sunny day.
I remember telling my first lie. I didn't think the consequences would come back on me and hurt so deeply. We all wish for a better world for our kids. An honest world.
Which way is the wind blowing?
Something safe for their dreams.
That way.
It's from the south.
But where do you start?
From the south. It's the north.
Rab is the eldest of my 4 children.
Is that west or that?
She's
west.
7. And tomorrow we're going to
east.
America.
Remember I was telling you about the Indians of America?
Yeah.
Well, they believe that in
She's
the
so
east,
trusting.
the east is the morning star, the colour of gold, the colour of the sun, you know, when it comes up of a morning.
Yep.
It's where the eagle lives.
What's the eagle?
Where do your people come from? Where fly from?
We're from Australia.
Australia?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Your first time in New York?
No, I've been here
Oh, you've been here before. Okay.
a couple of times, but it's my daughter's first time.
That's beautiful. When you go back?
Well, we've just got here.
Yeah, when you go, I mean, when you go back?
It was concern over being misled about a top-secret installation in Australia that made me step out and begin a journey to the country that built it. I wanted Rab to come with me, to feel this country, to listen to its heartbeat. Or isn't it the heart that gives the greatest clues to what really matters? I also want to find a man here who can tell us the very secrets of a place important to us all. It's called Pine Gap, and it's in the dead heart of Australia.
Israel, let me explain. Israel won't free the 400 Arabs because of the 4 American hostages, but they might release them in exchange for 4 Israelis. Once that exchange is made...
I first came to the United States 2 years ago with a story about Iran. I brought that story here to CNN, the world's largest cable news network.
Yeah, I'm finding it.
To get the Arabs freed from Israel in return for freedom for the American
No, you would only get them free.
The thing that struck me first about this place was how quickly stories were turned around. As a journalist, I've made mistakes turning around stories too quickly. In 1968, I wrote a story about Pine Gap. I got it wrong. I believe what my government told me.
They tell me what to do. They tell me what to read and how to read it.
Are you the boss of this? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you're the boss now, and you tell him what to do.
Yeah, so we take turns. Think that makes sense?
B5, Star Wars Europe is David, and the space station was VO.
Today, the American government is in the middle of a crisis.
After that feed, don't take the line, okay?
The integrity of the presidency is being questioned.
Stand by one. Hit it.
The president submits to a second round of questioning by the Special Commission's role in the Iran-Contra affair.
Go.
This is Newswatch. I'm Mary Alice Williams in New York. Should the U.S. military be allowed to use a proposed space station built and operated jointly by the U.S. and a group of allied countries?
Yes.
They're hammering that issue out in Washington today. European officials who thought they were buying into a civilian space station want to know exactly what the U.S. military intends to use it for. On top of that, NASA wants the right to veto all major decisions.
The president, I think it'd be very difficult to be the president of the United States. Being the head of another country would probably be easier. Being the head of the Soviet Union would be a snap, because you can do anything you want, and nobody can criticize what you're doing. In fact, nobody even knows about it.
There is another side to it. Have we come so far now that we have reached the best we can do, and it's now being corrupted, because corruption is talked about every day. Corruption. I mean, it's very difficult to explain, but I just get this feeling that we've gone...
Correct my history. The Greeks diminished and folded because of a decadent society where the people didn't have a stake in their own success. The Roman Empire crumbled because it was so territorial and spread out so far that it couldn't control all of the masses that it by then governed. The United States is not territorial. We are respectful of everybody's sovereign borders. I can't imagine that America wants to take over any other country. You know, we have been put in the position of being the spokesman for the free world.
Little Rab's gone. How suddenly things can change. Her grandmother is seriously ill and is calling for her back home. I'm going on alone. Winter in America is cold.
Fellas, what do you like about America?
Freedom.
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 What sort of freedom have you got?
Talking about you can do whatever you want. You hang out, people get drunk, go to the studio, pick up girls. You know, you work here, earn your money, hang out with friends late, nobody bothering you. That's kind of freedom.
It's not too strict. The laws are really...
It's not like Russia. You ain't got a curfew to go home. You know, you ain't got no security guard with pistols after you, watching you.
Gosh, it's cold.
Down to Washington, and on the first day there, the CIA is being asked to give some answers. Robert Gates has been nominated by the president to take over as director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Red ribbon, firing battery here. LA.
This is the closest we'll ever get to the leaders of the organization behind Pine Gap.
Would you raise your right hand? You, Robert M. Gates, solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may be seated.
I am deeply honored to have been nominated by the President to the position of Director of Central Intelligence. The President's instructions to me when he offered the position were direct and clear. You remain the eyes and ears of the free world. You are the tripwire. He told me that he wants his intelligence unvarnished, the good and the bad. The nation can be proud of its intelligence services, and if confirmed, I would be proud to serve with them.
A Senate Committee on Intelligence is investigating the CIA's actions with the National Security Council at the White House in sending guns and missiles to Iran. Robert Gates is on his own.
I understood from the outset that while this was a risky operation, there was no reason to quarrel with it.
Wait, stop. Of course there were reasons to quarrel with it.
Senator, it seemed to me that the activity that they were undertaking was primarily a diplomatic initiative for which we were providing operational support.
Sending guns to Iran and ammunition and tow missiles is a diplomatic activity? That's a diplomatic activity? Mr. Gates, we can't write a law to cover that. I mean, if we've got to satisfy that, your definition, there's no way to draft a law broad enough to, or tight enough to cover that. You want to think through it a minute?
Let me just say that I thought that the initiative to establish a dialogue with the Iranians made sense.
Nobody is going to question this, okay?
I also believe, as cynical as it may sound, that the idea of an exchange of bona fides leading to that dialogue had merit as well.
We exchanged bona fides when we lost 241 Marines in Beirut. We didn't have to establish another damn thing in terms of being bona fide.
You were basically supporting the National Security Council. Your folks were supporting it. I'm astounded that you don't believe that the National Security Council, when they're carrying out what is obviously an intelligence activity, comes under the purview of the law.
I think one of the issues that really remains unanswered is whether the NSC is regarded as an intelligence entity.
What is your definition of an intelligence entity?
One of the intelligence organizations of the
So what you're
branch.
telling us is we can't rely on you as director of the Central Intelligence Agency under the existing law to tell us anything that's illegal going on in the National Security Council, even when it comes to your attention.
Well, that's not what I intend to say.
Who pays the piper? Who calls the tune? To seek horizons that can be lost so soon. Who is the hero? Who is the fool who says honesty can save the world?
The current fiasco presents a picture of American foreign policy in disarray. Nothing has done more to damage the reputation and standing of the United States around the world than the breakdown of a consensus on American foreign policy. America's allies are afraid to follow us for fear that we will suddenly change direction.
The truth is so hard to come by in Washington.
Is it or was it ever U.S. government policy to kidnap terrorists and bring them to justice in the United States?
That question was also addressed at the White House press briefing this morning, and I have nothing further to add on that.
Are the state and defense departments in full agreement on measures that might be taken against terrorism?
The position of the administration on terrorism is perfectly clear. Secretary of State Schultz has stated it, and
There's almost an underlying feeling of contempt between the questioners and those questioned.
That this was one of those instances where state and defense, you know how they sort of switch positions all the time? State and defense on the
no,
same...
No, I don't know.
Oh, they do about ABM treaties and all sorts of things like that. But state and defense are on the same side on this one, and
now, wait a minute.
CIA,
what do you mean by this?
Kidnapping terrorists as a way of dealing with terrorism. The state and defense sort of lined up together. Are they on the
Such
same
a subtle
side on that
game.
issue?
I'm not going to comment on those allegations.
But surely a dangerous one when those chosen to serve the public give an impression of trying to master it.
I apologize. apologize. Given that,
I'm not trying to
I was
chastise
simply
you, but
responding to the
We
enthusiasm
pay the
of the
piper,
other interlocutors.
but seem so often unable to call the tune.
Not on the substance of your answer,
That's
though.
right. That's
Because
correct.
I would not want to use you
No,
out of context while you laugh.
No. It was that simply, I think I would reiterate that the position of the Secretary of State speaking for the administration on the policy of terrorism is perfectly clear.
You do believe that the administration's policy is clear,
I
when
certainly
many
do.
people do not, despite all of the revelations in the papers.
Yeah.
Dear Mr. President, I've asked to come to your place today to talk over a few things. I've just read in Time magazine that hypocrisy and corruption are destroying the soul of America. You're the wizard. I'm from Oz. I'm looking for the truth. Will I find it here? Or will it be lost in the shuffle? The cameras are waiting for someone who's seen the president. Senator, it seems to be a very cold winter in America.
But don't you have to get back over here? You just have all the control of Reagan and Ollie North.
How does it make you feel?
Oh, I feel all right. It's not bad. I mean, we always have problems in America, as they do in Australia. But there'll be another problem next year.
Well, how do you think you'll get through this?
Me?
America.
Oh, Matt, we'll plug along as we normally do.
May I have attention, please? The briefing with Mr. Fitzwater is about to begin. Thank you.
The White House chief spokesman has been asked to deal with the press today.
The president outlined his competitiveness package. He stressed that competitiveness means jobs, keeping them, getting them, and creating them.
And on the important question, the secret deal with Iran, it's who's going to keep their jobs at the White House.
No.
Mr. Fitzwater tells all.
They'll both tell me if there's any changes that need to be made.
In little rooms in the basement of the White House, journalists are working at arm's length from the president, wrestling with the differences between what the administration is saying and what it has done. The president hasn't made himself available to White House journalists for almost 4 months. It has been discovered that the illegal funding of the Contras in Nicaragua was one of only 63 covert operations earmarked for financing through secret bank accounts by those in the president's administration.
It's hard to see with all this unaccustomed sunlight. It's been a pleasure to have an old friend, Prime Minister Sheikh Shamir of Israel, back to the White House. His visit symbolizes the close and special relations between our countries. Prime Minister Shamir and I discussed Iran. I underscored our opposition to Iran's use of force, terrorism, and expansionism. In discussing Iran and other regional issues, the Prime Minister and I agreed on the importance of looking to the future instead of dwelling on the past.
A pat on the shoulder. Leaders of nations, old friends. The supply of arms went through Israeli middlemen to Iran, the country the president today called terrorist and expansionist. Such a beautiful garden, so peaceful. Inside this gracious building, deals have been struck, arrangements made. It was here that the final CIA plans for Pine Gap were approved 20 years ago. I'm on my way to a town outside Washington to talk to a man who was involved in the Pine Gap Agreement. After all of this time, perhaps we will get a little closer to the truth.
Take it from there. That's American.
That's American?
That's American.
We're trying to work out what the medicine of Washington is.
Medicine of Washington. I don't think the medicine of Washington is healing. It's not the type of medicine that will heal anybody. It's a type of medicine where if you want to make somebody throw tantrums and stuff like that, you give it to them to drink. Because it's like, it's almost the epitome of that of the man against man, dog eat dog situation here in Washington. The politics is horrible. You know, it's almost like everybody is after everybody. That's all we read in the news, and that's all I see. You know, the medicine of Washington is bad medicine. Bitter.
You angry?
I'm not angry. Why should I be angry about anything?
Just said it was bad medicine.
You get used to it if you drink enough of it.
The man who lives here was with the CIA for 15 years, before leaving to try to reform it. He felt the CIA was misusing its power and going too far in manipulating the affairs of other countries. He tried through Congress and the Senate to bring about change, and then wrote a book, which the CIA tried to stop. Victor Marchetti was the special assistant to the director of the CIA and was one of the men behind the Pine Gap Agreement.
We had already developed electronic satellites for picking up all kinds of radio signals and other emissions. You know, it was just put a stationary satellite up there, that is the one that orbits with the Earth, you know, some 20-some thousand miles above the Earth, and make it like a vacuum cleaner. Just suck up every conceivable thing that you, from microwave, or anything that, on any frequency that may be of value, just suck it up and then send it down with a pencil beam to a down station, such as the place at Pine Gap, and then process it and see what you can learn. So Australia just happened to be there. Australia is a secure environment because we're allies with the Australians and very close on military and intelligence matters of mutual concern. So that would be a good down station. And of course, the satellite, which was actually over Borneo, the original one, would be that would be well in range of eastern Siberia and northern China. From the very beginning, once they get the...
He was a close friend and CIA colleague of Marchetti's who entered Australia in 1966 to clear the way for the establishment of Pine Gap.
This looks good, and there's a place there, up there at Alice Springs. That would be a good location.
The operative's papers did not reveal he was from the CIA.
Everything makes sense. Our contractor, who's going to make the satellite for us, and that everything fits with him, and well, now it's about time we start talking to the Aussies. So it would start at the intelligence working level. The people working on this would begin to discuss it with their opposite number in Australia.
Did the Aussies, as you called them, know what was going on at that time?
Oh, sure. Of course. I told you. I explained to you, as the project would begin to develop, the Australians would be brought into it. The
Were they
intelligence
told
people,
exactly what
they'd
was
be told,
happening?
they'd be told what we're going to do and why it would be of interest to them and of value to them. Now, nobody tells anybody everything. I mean, it's the nature of the business is that you never completely trust anyone, and they never completely trust you. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. And there are cases where there will be mutual operations going on, and not only will the CIA be withholding information from their allies, they'll be trying to recruit some of the people in their, among their allies to work for them.
What was the aim of Pine Gap?
The primary aim was to collect electronic information on Soviet missile activities in eastern Siberia and Chinese missile activities, everything from testing to operational systems, and on the Chinese and northern China, and any other related military information that could be picked up, or any other general intelligence information. You know, since one of the capabilities was to intercept microwave transmissions. So there were a lot of things that could be acquired that would fit into various intelligence requirements that were established for the CIA.
See, I was told that it was a space research facility.
joint facilities.
Well, that was the cover.
That's what all Australians were told.
You know, that was the cover for it at the time. At the time, it was considered a very sensitive operation. Not so much to keep the Soviets or the Chinese from knowing what we were doing, because obviously the Soviets are very good at this. They can see that thing up there. They know what it is, and so they can put two and two together and say, well, the Americans have figured out a new way of spying on us. And we got to, if we don't already have it, we better get one too, so we can use it on them. And so the Soviets know what's going on. They don't say anything. I mean, that's the way the game is. The main reason for the secrecy was to keep the Australian and the American public ignorant, particularly the Australian public, because Australians are perceived by the Americans to be a little odd about some of these things. They sometimes don't appreciate the great threat that the Soviet Union and China and communism pose to the United States and the rest of the free world, including Australia. So we have to, like a big brother to a little brother, we have to protect them from themselves. What the Australian public doesn't know won't hurt them. I mean, there are very few things that are really so sensitive that you have to keep them secret from your own people. So by nobody knowing what's going on in Australia, and of course we're not going to say anything.
So it was a conspiracy to allow unhindered the gathering of intelligence and military secrets on Australian soil.
So you just put up a cover story and say it's a space project of some sort. Everybody knows that Australia was involved in our manned orbiting of the Earth and the moon launches and all that, and the whole NASA thing. It's a good, has a very good position, geographically speaking, for this.
You were telling a lie.
Well, yes, that's what cover is.
Today we are going into Pine Gap, that extraordinary place of secrets near Alice Springs in Central Australia. I'm with Australia's Minister for Defence, Kim Beazley. How did they feel about it?
Well, I think...
Kim Beazley negotiated this access to Pine Gap with the United States for many months.
Handle it from the point of view of how we'd handle it from the point of view of the security.
I was eventually informed it was the Australian government's intention to demystify Pine Gap. We had been granted just 5 hours inside.
Really? You're all happy? Well, I would suspect that they necessarily think this is the usual thing to be happening.
Such an ordinary looking entrance. A little gate. A brick building bathed by the burning sun. A place for anywhere. Arriving here, the heart begins to quicken. And you know everyone's watching.
As we go inside, no cameras or electronic equipment, recorders, apart from the approved equipment. Okay?
At this point, we're about to change camera teams.
Rolling. 1-1.
A contract crew from the Defence Department has just taken over. The agreement is that any part of the film deemed to infringe the security of Pine Gap is to be censored. This is one of the most private places on Earth. When it was built, we were told it was a research station for upper atmosphere and space phenomena. A place of no military significance. We know a little more now. It's about satellite systems, military secrets, and spying. The Australian government now admits it's a high priority nuclear target. Behind the perspex domes, giant parabolic dishes and satellite antenna. Inside the buildings, row upon row of computer terminals. Above, satellites, some 30 of which have been launched by the United States since Pine Gap was established. This system is capable of listening to the military conversations of field commanders in the Soviet Union, of sensing the exhaust fumes from missile launches, of seeing the symbols on the sides of missiles in northern China. Omnipotent, all-seeing. This is the most sophisticated intelligence system devised by man. The Australian government claims this is a joint American-Australian facility.
There's just no one around. I don't think I've seen one American. Where are they?
Well, they're, let me tell you, they're all around you, along with a fairly substantial number of Australians as well.
No,
in the
seriously, where is the commander? You know, I mean, can we talk to him?
Well, they're inside the buildings, and the view that the Americans would have, and this is a view that I would support completely on that one, is that when it comes to a discussion on the joint facilities, it is an Australian responsibility, not theirs, to hold that discussion. Now,
isn't it joint?
It is joint, but I think the Americans would acknowledge the country in which the facility is located, and to a very substantial degree be guided by that country on matters related to public revelation and debate about the facilities. It's enormously politically sensitive for the Americans. If the Americans were to come in and become active participants in the Australian political debate about the joint facilities, then I think they would lend themselves to accusations of political interference, being heavy-handed.
Is the CIA involved?
Well, we don't go into a discussion of the detail of who provides the various workers in different parts of the system. The cooperating agency is the Department of Defence, and it is with the officials of that department that we deal with on the joint facilities.
In my reckoning, there was a blatant lie to say we're building a space research facility.
I don't think the actual description of space research facility is in itself inaccurate. It's just simply incomplete.
Can it be used to help the American war-fighting machine?
In a sense, the information itself is value-free. How you put it to use is a second matter. My view would be that, on balance, that information that is gathered is more likely to serve the interests of international peace than otherwise.
At 1:30 every Monday afternoon, an American warplane, a Starlifter, flies in non-stop from US territory to take on board the week's harvest of information from Pine Gap. This will be flown back to the United States for decoding and analysis by intelligence organizations, including the CIA and the National Security Agency. The results are then passed on to the Pentagon for integration into military strategy. Pine Gap and Narunga, the other satellite ground stations south of here, are integral to the control and command system of the American nuclear warfighting machine. The real concern about Pine Gap and Narunga is that they are collecting value-free information to increase the military advantage of the United States. That the information gathered here is encouraging the Pentagon to put in place weapon systems and strategies for winning a nuclear war by striking first. The satellite signals have already been listened to live at Pine Gap and Narunga, and areas of special interest noted for deeper analysis back on American soil. The turnaround is 25 minutes. It's an operation conducted under high security. Every moment on the tarmac is a matter for vigilance. Hundreds of thousands of meters of electronic tape are loaded aboard the Starlifter. The reels cloaked by plastic and labelled Credible Dove. No more valuable cargo leaves Australia. Knowledge of extreme significance, plucked from the sky in the name of arms control and the security of the free world. Have you ever seen any information from Pine Gap that has helped arms control?
Well, I think the best way of handling that is to go to an example of what happens when one side or other loses confidence that it is capable of that monitoring. We have the example of Jimmy Carter trying to get through a second version of the SALT Treaty in the Senate after critical monitoring facilities had been removed from Iran.
Just ask you again, have you ever seen information from Pine Gap that has helped arms control?
Well, I guess I'd spend more time monitoring the activities of the joint facilities than any other minister has ever done. I spend a considerable amount of time with it. And when we say that the general purposes and functions of the joint facilities are what we say they are, and that role that you mentioned is incorporated, that is based on the most thorough understanding of the operations and the information which emerges.
So you know exactly what information is received here?
Yes.
You know how it's used?
Yes, we know where it goes to, yes, in generality, how it's used.
Well, I mean, some answers you're specific on, and others you say, well, in generality, but how it's used.
Yeah, to all reasonable intents and purposes, yes. The facilities are associated with the early warning function of missile attack. They're associated with the effective monitoring of arms control arrangements.
If Pine Gap is about arms control and deterrence, then why has the arms race accelerated so dramatically? Since it was built, the arsenal of strategic nuclear weapons has increased almost threefold. Since the first domes appeared at Pine Gap, no arms control agreement on offensive strategic nuclear weapons has been ratified. No agreement has committed any side to surrendering any of of its nuclear warheads. There are 50,000 nuclear weapons in the world today, poised, ready to strike, enough to blow up the world 13 times over. The United States has located its targets through Pine Gap. Is what our own Minister for Defence said today enough? We got just a glimpse. There have been 12 significant censorship cuts. 17 minutes of film cannot be shown. It was once said that Pine Gap was an innocent space research station. Instead, it has proved central to the greatest system of mass destruction the world has ever seen. When the red dust blows out here, you can hardly see in front of you. 30 years ago, a black dust pervaded the central desert of Australia. Nine nuclear bombs were let off in the name of peace. The truth of those nuclear explosions was not told to the people who lived here. Little Rabby's back with me, with Georgie, my second eldest daughter. They're coming with me to hear what happened.
Look out for the gate. I see it, I see it. I see the bird.
Wonder where we start, Rad.
Her name is Nuninger. In 1953, she heard the first bomb blast and saw the black dust. She is a leader of the Pitjantjatjara people and knows the desert and its secrets well. The decision to explode the British nuclear bombs was described by the then Australian government as a striking example of inter-Commonwealth cooperation. It was justified this way. England has the bomb and the know-how, and we have the open spaces. Together, we will help build the defences of the free world. Mr. Robert Menzies, the Prime Minister, told the Australian people that no conceivable injury to life, limb or property would emerge from the tests. It was the time of Maralinga, desert thunder to the Aboriginal people.
You like it? This place, Nuninger's just saying that...
Since then, Nuninger, her husband Ilijari and their people have been protesting against the use of the desert for nuclear projects. They say they saw their land poisoned and their people die.
You know what it is? You know what it does?
Kapalo tinglo ngala bakal ku pika tinglo ngala bakal ku pa macara ka tinglo ngala nya ponganya yo nyanga cha nyara.
What do you know about it?
Yeah, I know that Pine Gap. Too high, four. You can like a Pine Gap here, not perhaps it's a lot of people, South Australia, a lot of people, and some people crying. Pine Gap. Nangoloring ko pa ikoli, Pine Gap ang nangolog na. Maro Jordan.
Marung ka kuno ana pian pa jura.
Oh.
Jawala kunyo altinga jono ono palo waya parra ring pampun.
Ngani just explaining how they let that bomb off.
Kapitala.
You know calling?
Bayo calling you banyak bicara.
Pun kapitan.
Ono korano, uwan kara, lain tu
Oh wow.
Ka kuari palo ko ne.
Oh.
Kago nyara ja walang war pokoknya ko nyara ja war pokoknya. Kangen lang rata lang rupikang ko padani. Oh riri dengan ya oh iya. Kuar bad. Kulin dia nyara balo jana wal pong.
Jana
Kulu ay.
Ah, it's called Kototo. Kototo. Ah, 21.
Ala jido wati munda minma kuchara wiyaring.
Two old ladies died.
Wati wiyaring.
One man.
Minma wati kuchara wiyaring. Wati wiyaring. Minma wiyaring. Minma wiyaring. Wati wiyaring. Minma wiyaring. Minma wiyaring. Wati wiyaring. Wati wiyaring. Minma wiyaring. Pampa. Minna pampa. Wati pampa. Wati chin. Kana balala ho wan kara wiyaring. Wati minma. Wati minma. Juga ngalela kalilinga adengai juga ngalela kalilinga adengai.
After the first nuclear explosion, medical teams came from Alice Springs to treat the Aboriginal people. Nurses told Nuninja the sickness could be measles. It took 30 years to find out what happened here. At a Royal Commission in London, it was determined that no adequate consideration had been given to the people living there, or even to whether the weapons could be safely fired. The Commission found that the land had been poisoned by nuclear contamination, and that the people had been affected by nuclear fallout. When you begin a journey, you're not quite sure where it will take you. This is all the way from a piece of land that I often spend time at, 2,000 miles from here, my own home. And I wanted to give it to you.
Nyondomba konporengan nyondo wetini kangayolo kware wetini konpo porno nyangata nganampa manda nyangata nganampa porli wan kara nganampa kara lo palan jawan kara iridi ngulo kulia ngayo kungurang lo konpo ngana na wangaji ka pandang kala konpo wangaji cukur pa konpo nganyangka cukur kon ngayo la kon po ngarani trong ka ngayo lo wangka lapa walo pron
We were told there was no conceivable risk with the nuclear tests. We were told about an innocent space research installation called Pine Gap. We know now Pine Gap was not innocent. In one parlance, we were misled. Another way is to say we were lied to. And lies can come back and hurt. Who pays the piper? Who calls the tune? To seek horizons that can be lost so soon. Who is the hero? Who is the fool? Who says honesty can save the world?